Thank you so much for listening. If you find the CosmoFactory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the CosmoFactory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the CosmoFactory podcast. This episode is about strategic collaboration. It's about the vision and operational execution needed to become a competitive global player. It's about cosmetic science, communication, e-commerce, and more. On today's episode of the CosmoFactory podcast, I am speaking with Lieve Declercq, Chief Scientific Advisor for Proya Cosmetics and Vice President of the European Innovation Center. Lieve, welcome to CosmoFactory.
Thank you so much, Diana. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today.
Yes, of course, you're welcome. I appreciate your being here. Over the past year and a half, there have been a number of guests here on the podcast from companies that I knew quite a bit about before the interview. But of course, there are many guests and companies that I get to learn about because of these interviews, which is certainly one of the fun parts of hosting CosmoFactory each week. And I'm mentioning this because I had heard of Proya, but I did have to do a bit of reading to familiarize myself with the company. And just as we get into this, I will mention that Proya is both the company name as well as the name of one brand in the company's portfolio. But one of the more impressive details I noted in my reading was a trade media article calling Proya one of China's strongest beauty brands. Before we get to your work in Europe, I would like to talk about beauty retail in China, particularly e-commerce, which is the country's primary channel for beauty product sales, and that's not the case in every major market. What can you tell us about this dynamic?
That is indeed a very different strategy compared to the more mature brands that we see on the market. Proya has chosen to take an online strategy very early on. And that is what really makes the difference versus international brands that are more longer standing in this field, in this industry. Proya was founded in 2003 and then took a decision early on to make that an online strategy, to reach the market through digital tools, through digital communication. And at this moment in 2024, I would say, 95% of these sales are online sales, which means that this company is talking to the market in a very digital native way, in a way that targets mostly younger consumers, but it also talks in a way that is very intuitive, is very digital, is very enabled through the newest technologies. And that explains part of why Proya has been growing so fast on the Chinese market, because they communicate very directly, they understand their consumer very well. And that has become a big priority for most of the domestic companies, the China domestic companies, and explains the reason for their success.
Mhm.
And yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious, can you say anything about the China beauty consumer in particular that makes e-commerce more relevant there than in other markets?
Yeah. What we see is that, and I think that's a trend that is happening globally, the consumer is more savvy, is asking questions, wants transparency, wants to understand how products work, wants to understand what's in the product. And that communication in a transparent way is much easier through digital tools. Online, you can explain the story, you can demonstrate a product, but you can also talk about its mechanism, you can talk about how it's being developed. There's so much more you can share online and you can show. And that is really what we see globally. A lot of consumers want to understand better what the product is and want to go beyond the the marketing language and the marketing signs to truly understand and have that deep understanding of the product. So this intellectual approach, if you want. And we see that is particularly true in China, where the consumer will also compare. She's digital, she's savvy, she's curious, and she wants to have the best value for her money. And that is why she compares. She's and I'm saying she, but of course there's also male consumers, but
Right.
it's still mainly a young female population that is going for this type of an approach. And that is really the Gen Z population with the smartphone, born with a smartphone in their hands, that is really talking to the brands like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I discovered also. You mentioned that you did not know Proya
Mm.
before. Honestly, for me also, it's been a relatively recent discovery to understand who Proya is and why suddenly they are so present.
Yeah.
And they are, for me, it was a big discovery and a fantastic discovery to see that this is happening. This is really revealing to the world also what is possible and how this kind of companies can just grow and become dominant on the market, and how they establish that in a very thoughtful, visionary manner.
Yeah,
It's not
let's talk a little
something,
bit about
yeah.
that. I want
Mm.
to transition a little bit. It's clear Proya is a leader in the domestic market, but and as you've suggested, there are plans for what I would describe as sizable international growth, and that brings us closer to where you're based at the European Innovation Center. Um, Now, CosmoFactory listeners already know that I get kind of excited about supply chain partnerships. Um, Lieve, I'm hoping you can help us think about how significant partnerships are to growing the Proya business, and maybe how and why partnerships are a key piece of your approach also to innovation.
I think I see partnerships and collaborations at this moment mainly in the field of technology innovation. And that's where my focus is for the European Innovation Center, to bring technology innovation through partnerships and collaborations with academic institutes, with raw material suppliers that we have a strategic partnership with. So that is where that international phase is really brought up together by partnering with different experts in the global society of the beauty cosmetics world, tapping into those global collaborations from Europe into a European or US base is easier, so to speak, from Europe than it is from China. However, I see it as part of, it's an internationalization strategy that is happening through that kind of establishment of collaborations and partnerships, also recruiting people into the R&D structure with an international expertise is part of that. So you bring experts together to raise the level of internationalization and a level of expertise as a way of preparing a future step into a more global launch of the products. So that is really how this strategy is working out. But again, my role is mostly into bringing that technology expertise, the innovation in technology and science, and also being a visible or a voice, so to speak, for that internationalization. A voice mainly from the scientific level. That is my main role in that. I go to conferences, give presentations at meetings, also as a way of establishing networks and meet people, experts that are important for that collaborative effort. But of course, that integration of those technology innovation and that expertise then helps with product development, helps with innovation, product innovation, to establish and to create products that are world-class level, similar to what other big players are doing, working with the same raw material suppliers that supply to a world wide supply chain, but then in a very strategic manner, working in a customization process where we develop products together, we develop innovative raw materials and technologies together. That is the scope of what we're doing at this stage in the European Innovation Center. And that is a very exciting one.
That's
So,
fantastic. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. You mentioned academic institutions. You mentioned what I might think of as conventional industry partners. I'm wondering if you can help us think a little more specifically about the types of companies or institutions you work with and how you collaborate. Is there maybe an example you can share that would illustrate your sense of partnership?
Yeah. We work with like what you call the traditional industrial experts, the raw material suppliers, in a way that we customize ingredients. We've had a project, for example, with with Clariant, who was one of our main suppliers on a project where we brought together in the industrial partner with an academic partner from the University of Modena in Italy. And that collaboration resulted in a customized ingredient that is then integrated in a product, but also leads to presentations and publications. So that is a nice example of where I see that kind of partnerships going. There are many partnerships that have been put together also with universities and academic partners, as well as industrial partners in China. And one of those is with Zhejiang University, a very strong university that also contributed to a fabulous new way of looking at mitochondria with the deep learning model to evaluate how ingredients interact with the mitochondria and then select ingredients that are improving mitochondrial health. So, and what I appreciate very much is that it's not only serving the science, quote unquote, but it's helping to provide real product innovation that then fuels the communication towards the consumer. So that entire pipeline of going from the research, the technology innovation, coupling that with the market insights and bringing that to a consumer in a meaningful manner where you communicate about what you do, how it works, how the product works well for her is what I really like about this approach.
That's excellent. I love those examples. They very much showcase the way you're thinking. And I like what you said there at the end as well, that having a hand in the innovation, right, and partnering with whether it's an academic institution or an industrial partner in the development of a new technology or new science gives you almost fuller access to the information that you want to share with your end consumer. And I think that's very much what many beauty makers are looking for now. They want to share good information, and sometimes they
Right,
get the science story, and sometimes they're missing pieces that they aren't able to pass along. So that's interesting to
right.
think about.
I think there's a genuine interest from the audience in understanding their skin, understanding what a product brings to their skin, understanding how, how it works, why it works. And then that's what really makes people buy into like the whole science-led type of brands. Um, Together with the experience, that we all know that you want to understand with your head, but you want to feel it also that it's right for you, and you want to have that emotional connection with the product as well.
Sure.
So that's, I think, coupling those two and merging that with the true understanding of consumer needs and addressing those is what makes it exciting.
Yeah, yeah. No, and there are many beauty makers today who are aspiring to grow to a sizable uh, scale, I should say. And honestly, many who would like to compete with what we think of as the big five companies, companies like L'Oreal, like Unilever. As I understand it, Proya is charting a course, certainly not to overtake these companies, but to, be among their ranks, to be a peer
Right. Hmm.
in the global marketplace. I'm wondering what you can tell us about creating or taking action on a strategic vision of that magnitude.
Yeah. The strategic vision that has been pronounced by our chairman is what we call the double 10 vision, right? Being in the top 10 globally within 10 years. And he translates that very well. He expresses that very well on how he wants to achieve that. My role in that is on the R&D side and the innovation side, which
Okay.
is considered to be key to achieving that strategy. The company has focused from the beginning on creating its own lab. The company was founded in 2003. 2008 established its own skincare laboratory as a way of like taking the R&D part into their own hands. And then recently, 2023, created a very in-depth R&D facility, state of the art. I've seen it. It's fantastic. With a state-of-the-art center in Longwu, skincare focused, and a state-of-the-art center in Shanghai, hair and scalp care focused. And in 2024, we added on the European Innovation Center. So that is part of that whole strategy of establishing the international double 10 vision, driven by scientific excellence and driven by an emphasis on guaranteeing an excellent level, world-class level of R&D and product innovation that then makes that growth or fuels that growth from a business point of view. So that whole approach is key to that vision from the beginning, has only been emphasized over the years. And now with the establishment of the R&D centers, the global R&D centers, and as I said before, the recruitment also of people with an international expertise from big companies, from P&G, I used to be with Estée Lauder before. So different people with an international background in R&D and innovation help also to create that internal globalization approach. Yeah, internationalization from internal capabilities and building that gradually for the future. So that is how I see that contribution to the Double 10 strategy. I think it's ambitious. Right now we rank, I believe, at 28th position in terms of global revenue. Seeing at how Proya is progressing and is taking that with a very intentional approach. There's a true vision behind it. There's the effort put behind ensuring product R&D, innovation, and quality also of manufacturing. And that to me is the key to success and building that expertise for the future.
Sure. We've seen this idea of science communication really emerge across consumer goods industries in recent years. But the correlation between your work in R&D, right? As you've described your job, setting up these partnerships, leading the innovation center, I have to say I'm a little jealous. It sounds quite fun. You get to see
It
very,
is. It
very
is.
interesting things happening.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. Yeah.
but then to have someone in your position thinking directly about that level of science communication, about what's going to show up on social media for the end consumer, can you say anything further about that? Again, just in my experience, many of my friends in cosmetic science don't get to touch the consumer in that way. I'm just curious if you can say anything else about the strategy or the experience of that connection.
Mm, it's hard to address that question directly because I help prepare, I help communicate from what I see from here. I don't speak Chinese. What I do see and that what I do know from how they execute the scientific communication is that the explanations about mechanism of action, the explanations about the ingredients are very in-depth and are a direct translation of what we do at the R&D level. It's completing like clinical numbers where which everybody does, increase in whatever, decrease in wrinkles, explaining how is where the difference comes in, and where explaining how this and that ingredient is new to the formula, is going to achieve an effect by directly targeting the dermal epidermal junction, for example, to address sensitive skin. So really explaining how that works is what I see as the main differentiator, and also as a direct impact of what we do at the R&D level into the scientific communication towards the consumers. But what makes the difference also is the role played by what we call the KOLs in China that really want to understand, that really want to explain in
I'm
depth.
sorry, I
And
can't think of what KOL stands for right now.
key opinion leaders, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, KOLs, key opinion leaders that are talking to the consumer in a direct way, explaining, and they're not employees. They play a role of translating, of communicating, of helping the consumer understand. But they go in such depth into what the science means and how they can translate that and how they can communicate that to the consumer. Again, I don't understand because I don't speak Chinese.
Sure.
I do see the what they use and how when I get a translation for how what they talked about, it's like, whoa, this is so detailed and this is so well communicated in a way that is also direct. I mean, these live streaming events that are so typical for the
Hmm.
Chinese market, they talk about all of that. They talk about, all the science behind it as a way of explaining the product. And that to me is very unique and is a very unique role also played by these people that do a very, very good job and are very influential also when they explain how it works. They're considered to be experts in the field.
That's interesting. You know, I mentioned it at the beginning of our conversation how much I love learning through my work. And I'm hoping we can learn a little bit from you, Lieve, before we finish up our conversation. And we've learned so much already. I don't mean to imply that we haven't, but I'm curious about cosmetic science in particular. As you've suggested, there's a lot going on in your work. Are there any research initiatives that your team is working on or cosmetic science observations you can share with us?
Yeah. I think in general, the cosmetic science, as we said, is moving. We see some trends that are global trends. In every single conversation, you will hear the word longevity in Europe as a way of expressing that we're moving away from anti-aging to a more proactive approach, to a more uh, positive approach to youthful aging and health and longevity of the skin. That is definitely a trend that I see continuing in cosmetic science and all the research behind what makes the skin more vital. Personally, I find everything related to mitochondria a really important focus in all of that. So mitochondria, mitochondrial health, mitochondrial functioning is really core to that. And that is an active area of research, cosmetic science, but beyond. Last week, I was at the World Conference of Targeting Mitochondria, which is like a very high level conference um, talking about mitochondrial impact on anything from the origin of life to many, many diseases that are dependent on functioning of the mitochondria and all the different kinds of approaches that can help with the uh, targeting the mitochondria in those diseases. We're looking at it from a skin perspective, but again, to me, if you're looking at mitochondria, you're touching vitality of the skin, you're touching aging of the skin, you're touching pigmentation, you're touching many different aspects that are related to mitochondrial functioning. So that is a particular area of skin research where I'm particularly fond of and keen on continuing that. So that is one example, but I think that's an important pathway into preparing the future of cosmetic science and product innovation.
Sure, sure. Well, we'll all have to keep our eye on mitochondria maybe a little more closely than we have been. But Lieve, I have to say, this has been a great conversation. You have a vivid perspective on the cosmetics industry, and I thank you for speaking with me here today on the Cosmo Factory podcast.
My pleasure, Diana.
Thank you so much for listening. If you find the Cosmo Factory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the Cosmo Factory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the Cosmo Factory podcast.